Hey Bookworms, welcome back to the channel and welcome if you're new. I'm Sam and today we're going to be talking about the top 6 books that made me cry. So I've read so many books that have made me cry, but if I listed them all, we'd probably be here for a while. So I decided to narrow it down to 6, and if you guys end up enjoying this, then please hit that like button and I'll do a part 2. So let's jump into the first book. The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. In this book, we follow Addie, who lives in a small village, but she wants more. She wants to venture out and explore, but the people in her village want her to get married and have children. But Addie doesn't want this. So she starts praying to the gods, and it helps her basically not end up getting married. And then one time, she prays to the gods after dark by mistake and makes a deal where she becomes immortal, except nobody remembers who she is. Everybody sort of like will see her and then just forget her. And she spends the next 300 years being forgotten, never being able to put her place on the world. And it's an incredibly lonely feeling reading this book. You genuinely feel like Addie. And wow, I've never felt so lonely reading something. It was just incredible that the author manages to make you feel this way. Addie goes through so much that there were so many times that I shed a few tears, but the end of this book definitely made me cry. I was not expecting it, and I need more from Addie's character and her story. But the author's already said that there will not be any more books, and I mean, I think it just wraps up beautifully. But yeah, my heart breaks thinking about this character. Definitely cry-worthy book, incredible. And if you've not read this book, you need to. It is so good. Next up, we have Float Plan. This book is a contemporary romance, and from the very beginning of this book you get that it's going to be sad. I mean, even from the blurb. We follow a character called Anna whose boyfriend has committed suicide, so she decides after I think a year or so to take out this yacht and go on a journey that they had planned together. Of course, it's not that simple because she's not very good at sailing, and she meets a guy called Kian, who also has his own problems. He has a prosthetic leg and he's got his own story. Throughout this book, we definitely feel Anna's grief and her anger, and there's moments in this book that genuinely grip your heart and just made me cry. There's a moment on this beach scene where she's looking at the character Kian and she realizes that her partner, I forget what his name is, should have been this person, should have been Kian. This is what he should have been doing. This is where they should have been. And she's absolutely devastated. She just breaks down, starts crying, screams, and she's angry, and it's just such a raw emotion. You really felt it coming off the pages, and it just felt so intense. But there are also moments that are just so beautifully written that it just made me tear up and feel happy as well. This book manages to make you feel absolutely broken for Anna, but then at the same time you have these moments where it's just so beautifully happy and perfect that you're crying happy tears. When I finished this book, I remember I kept like turning the pages thinking like, whoa, is that it? Because this was just honestly amazing, and it's one of my favourite contemporary romance books ever, and I definitely think you should read this. But again, like I said, the suicide topic is in this book because her partner does commit suicide. I mean, the very first bit in this book is his letter to her, which is here. Like, it starts off with the letter of him committing suicide and saying goodbye, and that's just honestly heartbreaking. But I also feel like Anna's anger is incredibly real as well, because although you're absolutely devastated and heartbroken, I feel like the anger stage would definitely come as well, because this person's making you feel all this grief that you shouldn't have to feel, but at the same time, whatever this person was going through is not their fault. And I think Anna's struggle with being angry at him but also missing him and wanting to move on is just done really well. Then we have The Nightingale, and I don't think this book shocks anyone that this is on this list. I mean, everybody who's read this book has probably cried. This is probably the one book that made me full on ugly cry while reading it. If you don't know what this book's about, we follow 2 sisters called Izzy and Vivian. They are both sisters. The Nazis have overtaken Paris and World War II has started, and it shows the sisters' journey throughout this. One sister goes her way, another sister kind of goes her way. I don't want to say too much to spoil it, but the journey that these sisters go through is just like a stab in the chest. And I remember, like, it wasn't even like 100 pages in this book and I was already crying. People say that you're going to cry at the end of this book, but you're going to cry throughout this book. There are moments where I was crying so much I could not see through my tears. I had to physically put this book down to compose myself and then pick it back up again. It was such a difficult read, but at the same time it was just an incredible story, and I fell in love with these characters and I just thought how incredibly brave they are. It also teaches you about World War II and what it was like being in Paris at that time and being a woman. That's what Krista Hanna does. She takes stories and she makes them about women and what they were going through in that time, necessarily the women that are probably forgotten in time and not really talked about. When we talk about World War II, you necessarily think about the war and the men fighting in the Holocaust. You don't think about the women and what they had to go through, like the women who had to stay home when the men went to fight, or all that sort of stuff. But this is one of those books that I can't imagine something making me cry more than this one did. This book has a place on my heart forever. I absolutely fell in love with this book despite the fact that it broke me. Kristen Hanna is honestly incredibly talented. I would recommend this book to everyone. If you like historic fiction, you like books about sisters, you want a book that's going to make you cry, then this is definitely going to do it. But the ending, when people tell me like that ending is going to make you cry, I don't think I quite expected the ending to be what it was, and it completely devastated me. And yeah, so of course this one was going to fit onto the list. Sticking to the exact same author, and I expect nothing less from this author now to read her books and cry, and that is These Four Winds. Now, in the beginning of this book, I was a little bit, this is a bit slow, and then suddenly, I think 100 pages in, it just started, like, everything just started picking up. So we followed this woman who is married, and she's got 2 children, and it's sort of in the time when the drought was happening, and the whole dust bowls, the big dust clouds were happening, and how everybody was struggling. And I never really knew much about this. We didn't go to talk about it at school. So this book really educated me on that as well. And our main character ends up leaving to go to California with her children to try and get like a better life, because nothing's good in Tesco. Nothing ever good in Tesco, but yeah. Nothing's really great in Texas at the moment. Everybody's struggling, and for the sake of her children, she leaves. But when she gets to California, things are really difficult because there's a whole recession, and this book really hit hard. There are 2 main moments in this book that made me really ugly cry. Like, again, I seem like to only ugly cry with books when it comes to Kristen Hanna. And there's one particular moment that I remember happened in this book, and I was so disgusted. Not with the writer, but with that fact that people treated people like this, because this is based on historic fiction. And it shocks me. And thinking about that someone can be treated this way, and then the tragedy of what happens because of that, it's just absolutely it's just wrong. It's like, and it just really broke my heart. I can't imagine having to go through that. And the ending, once again, her endings just rip your heart out. I feel like going into reading a Kristen Hanna book, you've got to expect that your heart's going to be broken, and the ending is going to completely destroy you. But yeah, of course I had to put this one on the list, because not only did this educate me and break my heart, but also absolutely admire these people, the strength that they had and everything else. I just felt like this book was just amazing, and Kristen Hanna is such a talented author, and I have to read more from her. I actually have the book, The Great Alone, and I haven't read it yet because the writing is really small. I'm going to really struggle to read that, so I might have to get the hardback version just because my eyesight ain't great. Next up we have Under the Whispering Door. Now, I wasn't really expecting to cry reading this one, which is probably surprising considering that this book solely focuses around death. TJ Klune manages to write about death but make it easy to digest. He makes it sort of comforting, and that's just insane. We follow this character who has a heart attack and dies, and then the Reaper comes to get him and takes him to the ferryman, which is the person who will help you move on, and he's at this like little coffee house. And every single character in this book has a place in your heart. Like, every single one of them grow on you, and you just can't imagine them not being in this book. I fell in love with every single character, even Wallace, whose character is not very great at first, and seeing how he changes throughout the book was just done so well. But what got me with this book were 2 moments. There's one scene with a character, I can't really say too much about it, but he's basically someone who had died, and it's what's happened to him. He sort of like reaches out to our main character Wallace, and I don't know why that made me cry, but what really broke my heart, and I was sitting there crying, and my partner was playing the game at the time, just looks at me, and I was sat there crying like, I said I was gonna cry. And that is the ending to this book. It is beautifully done, perfectly done, but it really grips you, like, it literally tore my heart apart. But oh my god, it is the most perfect way to end this book, and I just think TJ Klune is incredible at doing that. I know a lot of people say like it's not as good as The House in the Sea, but I think we have to stop comparing it to that because it's his own story and it's so good. And I can't wait to read more by this author because, wow, this is just incredible. If you have not read this yet, you need to. It is so good. Now, the final book on this list is one that I definitely didn't think it was going to make me cry. Like, I did not go into this book even thinking I was going to get emotional reading this. And that is The Lighthouse Wishes. This book is a horror / thriller where we follow a character. Well, we follow a bunch of characters. We follow like 2 characters or so. They're basically 2 timelines. So we've got the past where the main character we're following is a child and they've gone to live on this island, and something happens one day and she's the only one to come out of it alive or not missing. And in the present day, we're following her and she's now pregnant, I believe. And she gets a phone call one day saying that they found her sister. Except her sister's the same age she was when she went missing all those years ago. So we have this like sort of science fantasy weird thing happening, and the book, oh my god, the book is so addictive. Like, both timelines are so addictive, which is rare. 2 different timelines, it can be hard to be like enjoying both equally, but with this one I was hooked. You're probably thinking like, okay, but why did you cry? Why? The ending of this book, I found it super emotional that I actually cried. I shed some tears and I was not expecting it. I love this book. I read The Nesting by this author and I really enjoyed it, but this, wow. This one makes me want to pick up more from this author, and I'm hoping that they're going to bring out something this year, because if you've not read this and you enjoy thrillers, go ahead and pick it up, because honestly you won't be disappointed. I know it labelled a little bit as horror, but I'm sure there's like only one little scene that was kind of horror. Otherwise, it's more thriller with this sci-fi sort of twist on it. It was so beautifully written that I just couldn't help it. It was just such a beautiful moment that happened, and yeah, it actually just sort of touched me. But yeah, so there we have it. Those are the 6 books that made me cry. If you guys, like I said, do want me to do a part 2 to this, then just let me know and I will definitely do that. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button, and until next time,